Good morning and welcome to Middle East AI News Live, the wrap. Ahlan wa sahlan. I'm Carrington, Malin. So what is the wrap? It's a Middle East AI News Live weekly show that rounds up the region's AI and emerging tech news. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Asem Galal as my co-host this morning. Asem's an old friend and a legend in the region's technology sector. He began his career working with the IDSC in Egypt, which is a think tank and information technology support center for the Egyptian government. He's also worked with Hewlett-Packard, with Microsoft, McAfee, before co-founding Galal and Karawi Management Consulting. Galal and Karawi Management Consulting, also known as G&K, helps technology vendors establish a successful sales and value supply chain in territories across the region. Asem's also a familiar face on CNBC Arabia, where he's often invited to talk about technology news and trends, also Bloomberg TV. Good morning, Asem. Good morning. Great to have you on the wrap as my co-host this morning.
Thank you.
So before we begin, Asem, why don't you tell us a little bit about G&K and what G&K gets up to?
So we started in 2008, and at that time, if you remember, it was the economic crisis, and our idea was very simple. Every crisis offers an opportunity, and the opportunity is that you disrupt, obviously, the norm because it's a crisis, and people are more open to come out to look at different solutions that would help them grow. So our opportunity as a company was to help our clients grow in the times of crisis. Now, it's been tough times since 2008. I mean, we're still in some economic turmoil as we speak. So this paradigm still holds true as we speak. And lately with the AI, we've been able also to offer other growth opportunity to our clients based on growth. Again, growth is the key word that we're talking about, and growth in times of turbulence is our specialty.
Yes, I think we're destined to be in turbulent times for quite a while now, and AI certainly is not going to give us any breaks.
That is true.
Cool. Thanks very much for that. Today, we're going to be talking about a few of the big stories from the week. The UAE, of course, is currently hosting the United Nations 28th Convention on Climate Change, or COP28. And AI has been a key topic of discussion during the past week. As you might imagine, it could well provide that little bit of magic that we need to create a more sustainable world. There are also downsides to that. And we'll be talking about both of those. This week saw the launch of a new global artificial intelligence alliance, simply called the AI Alliance. This is something that's led by IBM and Meta, with 50 co-founding members from around the world, including Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence in the UAE. Meanwhile, Korean media reported this week Naver, which operates a famous internet search engine in South Korea called Naver, has just signed a deal with Riyadh-headquartered IoT Squared to develop digital twins platform for Saudi Arabia. And we'll also be talking about new research on AI priorities of UAE business leaders from data analytics software company Alteryx, which has just completed a recent survey. The survey seems to suggest that businesses in the UAE actually want to see more regulation in AI and believe this is important in their plans. So more of those stories in a few moments. However, before we open up the first topic, here's some other headlines that caught my eye during the week. Naturally, given that COP28 is taking place in the UAE, there's some technology stories announced related to sustainability issues. And this week, Abu Dhabi's Technology Innovation Institute, or TII, has launched its blockchain-powered carbon tracking and trading platform, which will facilitate monitoring and international trade in carbon tokens. Importantly, because the blockchain has a high energy consumption, the team at TII's Cryptography Research Center have created an energy-efficient blockchain platform. And the new blockchain platform will enable secure, auditable, and transparent carbon trading among adopting enterprises and nations. And in Oman, Sohar University of Technology and Applied Sciences has signed an agreement with Sohar Port and Free Zone to create an artificial intelligence lab on its campus. Now, we've obviously seen the UAE and Saudi Arabia invest heavily in AI and in AI research centers over the past 5 years. However, countries around the region are focusing more and more on doing similar things. And the new AI lab in Sohar is an example of one of those. Oman's really stepped up its AI program over the last couple of years, and in the last few months has rolled out government and education programs focused on building AI capacity and introducing new ways to use AI in the Omani government and in other places. 𝗪𝗪𝗡𝗏 port is actually one of the fastest growing ports in the region, and it's a partner port of the port of Rotterdam. So it makes perfect sense that Soha University of Technology and Applied Sciences should partner with 𝗪𝗪𝗡 port. And I expect in the future that we'll see some use cases for AI coming out of that partnership as they research new AI projects. Back in the UAE Space Agency announced the launch of its geospatial analytics platform in partnership with Bayanat. Bayanat, of course, is the 𝗪𝗏𝗘𝗀𝗏 company that listed on Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange last year, ADX. And this is an interesting story because it's very relevant to the UAE's focus on AI and big data, and also helps explain some of its aspirations through the UAE space program. Many countries in the region now have their own space programs as satellites become smaller and easier to manufacture and easier to launch. The UAE is definitely at the forefront of that effort. And all of these satellites, of course, are sent into space to capture data and capture volumes of data and transmit the data back to Earth. And this is used for a variety of things, including the weather, urban planning, and to the geophysical uses. Now, with the increases in geospatial data, the data related to the Earth's surface, urban development, transport, weather, there's a huge opportunity to process and analyze that data for different uses. And the launch of the geospatial analytics platform is part of the UAE Space Agency's effort to make more of that data available to researchers, scientists, startup founders, and in fact, any developer or organization who can leverage that data to create new digital services and applications. And the hope is that this will have a knock-on effect and help to create more innovation and more startups and more R&D in the UAE. And I'll just mention one more piece of news from the week, which is about Abu Dhabi's new smart and autonomous vehicle industry cluster, 𝗧𝗛𝗑𝗏𝗧. Electric vehicle manufacturer Faraday Future has just signed an agreement with Abu Dhabi Investment Office, which is ADIO, to move to Abu Dhabi's new smart and autonomous vehicles industry cluster. The California electric vehicle company plans to establish a regional headquarters. They're going to establish a manufacturing plant, and they're also going to set up an advanced R&D center, all in 𝗧𝗛𝗏. This is one of many companies over the last couple of months that have announced plans to move into 𝗧𝗛𝗏 following the launch of that new industry cluster in October. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing more in the coming weeks and months about other companies doing deals with 𝗧𝗏𝗏 as well. If you're a subscriber, then you know that I send out a news digest every Thursday morning via email and via LinkedIn with a roundup of all the key headlines across the region, covering AI, big data, digital transformation, urban mobility, unmanned systems, and much more. You can subscribe to the weekly update via the website, middleeastainews.com. This week's show is co-hosted by Asem Galal, co-founder of Galal and Karawi. Asem is a keen follower of artificial intelligence news and trends, and obviously applies this interest and knowledge with his clients. Asem, what's caught your eye recently in the realm of AI?
I mean, some of the news that you mentioned, the availability of, data from space, one of the key challenges for the open source community in AI across the world is to find data sets that are relevant and that are, updated and well selected and so on. So the availability of such data sets for the community is amazing because, the innovation of building new AI or specialized AI systems to work on those data sets and have those data sets to learn from and so on is, it's very, very important. And in the future, having data that is, ethical in the sense that it was well sourced, in the sense that it's legal to use and so on, will become more and more difficult. And we'll see more and more copyright issues going to where did you get your data from and is it biased or not and so on. So seeing more organizations provide data sets that are, licensed to be used by the public is really, really crucial for the small and the open source models and, the small vendors to come up with more innovation.
So moving on to our first topic. This week saw an announcement of something called the AI Alliance, which is an international community of leading technology developers, researchers, technology giants, and sort of research and R&D coming together to advance the open, safe, and responsible development of AI. And of course, this is something that's been topical for the past year. We've seen questions and reviews at the US Congress and the UK's Parliament, and in fact, in governments all over the world. How do we develop safe AI, and how do we prioritize humanity in that development? So IBM and Meta have launched this AI Alliance in collaboration with over 50 founding members and collaborators globally. It's a who's who of those that are involved in AI. So 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗧, Dell Technologies, Oracle, many more, and then universities and research organizations like Cornell University, Linux Foundation, and Boston University, Harvard University, and Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence in the UAE. This was just announced during the week. So it's a brand new AI alliance. There is a website with more information on this, which I'll post in the comments after this show. And I guess we don't know too much about exactly how this will operate, except the interesting thing is that on the roadmap is to create institutions or help create institutions around the world that can help shape the evolution of AI in ways that better reflect the needs and complexities of society, humanity, and taking into account all these concerns about the risks of AI. Anything that brings together private, public sector, education, research, and the AI, the technology giants of the day is a good thing. And there are other initiatives. This is one of a number of different initiatives that have been launched by groups of companies and organizations and governments and NGOs to address issues like this. Got any comments, Asem?
Indeed. I remember remember the letter that came out that we should pause IT for 6 months. And I remember there were like very, very big names signing that letter. And obviously, there were two camps. One camp that's saying that AI is totally harmless. The other camp is saying this is going way too fast. We need to pause it. And I don't care which camp you're on, but I'm very interested in one argument that the camp that was against was saying. They were saying, if we stop for 6 months, what would the Russian or the Chinese do? And that is, in my opinion, a very, very dangerous thing. If we politicize everything in the world and everything is about who's going to win, and we become hyper competitive, and it's all about the Western bloc and the other bloc and stuff like that. This is not how humanity will progress and survive. And this is why I want to see on the name of the people in the alliance, I want to see more Chinese AI leaders. I want to see more Chinese universities, Russian, African, and so on, because that's the only way to guarantee that, the stakeholders, the global stakeholders, see the same issues there. Because otherwise, everyone will say, no, I will not be able to regulate because the others will not regulate and they will be more advanced than me. So I'm really thinking that this is about time we grow up as a human race and, ditch politics and focus on what's really important here.
Yeah, I'd second that. It really needs to be a human effort that's all inclusive, that looks at these issues. I'm just looking through the longer list of the 50 companies that are part of this alliance, and it's difficult really to filter out which countries they're from. But obviously, most of them are US institutions, technology companies. And you do have Sony from Japan. You do have University of Tokyo from Japan. Chinese companies not evident in the list. Let's hope that the focus of this alliance and other alliances becomes inclusive to include the whole world, and obviously the impact of AI and the way that it's being used and the demands of AI. And we talked about this yesterday I did a lunchtime with Mohammed bin Zayed, University of Artificial Intelligence. Artificial intelligence places great demands on developers and on users. And if you can afford the best technology, you can afford supercomputers, you can afford lots of bandwidth, then obviously developing AI is very achievable. but a lot of countries less able to afford those kind of things. So it will mean different things to people in different countries as we see AI develop.
I mean, we used to talk in the 90s about digital divide. It's got to be AI divide moving forward.
Absolutely. I mean, since the 90s, the UN has been sort of championing digital democracy and equality and avoiding a digital divide. But obviously, as each wave of technology comes, then we face a new set of challenges on how to cope with the new digital divide that's coming. And AI is definitely, one of those that could either divide us or unite us. So let's hope it does the latter. Perhaps we could change topic and move on to something else. The UN 28th Convention on Climate Change, 𝗪𝗏𝗡𝗀𝗏. Newspapers are full of it. You can't move without seeing something related to 𝗪𝗏𝗡𝗀𝗏. And we've also seen technology announcements. I mentioned some already. You want to have a chat about that?
Sure. So this is the 28th Convention on Climate Change, 𝗪𝗏𝗡𝗀𝗏, and it's just started last week. Obviously, the focus here again is on AI and how AI offers, lots of ways to manage carbon emission, energy consumption, and how we can become more sustainable. Obviously, there's huge potential here, how to implement and monitor solutions, reduce energy consumption, and so on. But AI itself is a big user of, energy. And one of the interesting facts, if you have 5 users querying ChatGPT for a minute, this is like a 60-watt lamp on for 1 hour. So,
Exactly.
The AI itself is adding to the footprint that it's supposed to, help solve. So that's, a paradox that we have to work on as we move forward. And obviously, to cool off this AI, there's an estimate that it takes around half a liter for every 5 to 50 prompts. So every 5 to 50 prompts that user posts, half a liter of water is used to cool down the servers there. So there's lots of things to think about. Let's look first at the positive ones. I would start with that. Lately, many people just link AI with generative AI, and that's what we think about. Now, this is only one aspect of AI. It has become so fashionable lately with ChatGPT, but we should not forget that at the core of AI is pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is very useful in model building. So if you want to come up with a model that mimics, reality and that you can use to explore the future, predictive. So AI is a core player there. There's also specialized AI. That AI is like the one that played chess with Kasparov back in the old days, and that was an IBM AI at that day. So all those types of AI, whether they're specialized to work on a specific model or they're specialized to build a model and see how that model changes with different factors, simulations, or predict a certain pattern and see how it's going in the future. Those are the things that would help us predict, what is working and what is not working in, lowering carbon emission. It will help us come up with, like you pointed out before, CJ, digital twins. Digital twins are like I can put every part of a plant, a factory on my computer. I see a representative of the engine, for example. I can see how the engine becomes more heated. I can see everything as it happened, but also I can take that digital twin into a hypothetical situation without taking its physical twin to the same, situation. So if I have a car, I can take the digital twin and, simulate an accident to see how that accident will affect the digital twin and avoid to have that on the physical twin of that. I hope I didn't lose you in this description.
No, I was just going to say this is the great promise of AI, isn't it? That it will be able to solve the world's biggest problems for us. And
Absolutely. So,
uh,
and the problem is we don't know the answer. So you want to experiment and do a trial and error with the least cost possible. So if you come up with those models, simulation, digital twins, and so on, you can do such experiments with high accuracy and with very little cost because you're not damaging or you're not, risking anything on the physical world. It's all in the digital world. Now, obviously, it has to be really, really a twin between quotations in the sense that what you're simulating is actually reflecting the actual physical object that needs to be simulated. But with the advancement of AI, we're seeing better and better improvements on that. So that's part of how we can solve this. On the part of how AI should consume less power, two aspects here. One aspect is chips. IBM is working on a chip, an AI chip that uses 15 times less power than the current chips. So, a different design of chips with a focus on less power consumption is there. And obviously, we've seen lately a very interesting trend in open source small language models. So LLMs as large language models. We've seen small language models like the Okra, like Mistral, like, and a number of those ones have really shown very promising results compared to other bigger language models. So question is, can we come up with smaller language models that are as good, if not better, than their bigger counterparts? So there will be advancement. Obviously, what we see now is the worst, simply because we just started. Things should get better from here.
yes, actually, in yesterday's conversation with Dr. 𝗟𝗓 𝗏 from Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence, he made a very good point that actually solving this problem of energy consumption from AI, and obviously we need to bear in mind that people are racing now to build larger and larger language models and AI models with more power, and it can handle more data all the time. So the energy consumption for those models is just skyrocketing. And his point was that this is not a one fixed deal where we find the thing that's wrong and fix it. This is actually things that need to be fixed all the way through the system, from the chips to the communications between the chips to the external communication to the way that models work. And creating smaller footprint AI models was also part of that, and that's part of the research that the university in Abu Dhabi is doing. Perhaps we could move on to another topic, a new topic. As I mentioned in the introduction, South Korean media this week reported on a deal that was signed between Naver Corporation and 𝗪𝗏𝗘𝗞'𝗦 IoT² to develop digital twins in Saudi Arabia for Saudi cities. Now, this actually follows an announcement that was made in October during the visit of South Korean president to Saudi Arabia. And there was purportedly $100 million deal signed by Naver with the Saudi government. And the scope of that deal was to develop cloud-based digital twin platforms for cities in Saudi Arabia over the next 5 years, starting in 2024. It would include digital twins for Riyadh, Medina, Mecca, and it wasn't reported, but I'm guessing also Jeddah. This news today is an agreement with IoT², which is a joint venture set up by STC, Saudi Telecom, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, Public Investment Fund, PIF. And IoT was set up, I believe, last year to focus on IoT. And this agreement with Naver seems to be that to reflect that IoT² will be Naver's development partner in Saudi Arabia and work on this deal that was announced on October to create digital platforms for these different Saudi cities. So that's the news. And you were just mentioning digital twins a moment ago, Asem. Obviously, Saudi Arabia, huge implications, because the sort of difference between Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Gulf in many cases is just the scale. And when you're looking at scale and you're looking at big cities, big factories, big plants, big systems, infrastructure, then that's a perfect use case for a digital twin. However, having said that, creating digital twins to this level, cloud-based digital twins that are going to impact the planning, the management, and the optimization, if you like, of smart cities in Saudi Arabia, and you're creating a digital twin for Riyadh. That sounds like a huge proposition to me. What do you think?
That is definitely a challenge. I fully understand the thought chain behind it. I mean, it's really important, especially not just Riyadh. Riyadh is definitely a challenge for any platform in terms of size and in terms of complexity, but also the newer areas that Saudi is working on. It is really important to accommodate for the rapid growth of population, rapid growth of consumption of things, and so on. And a digital model will become very useful because it will give you not only projections, but also a good way to test things. So if you, in a complexity like Riyadh, for example, want to, renovate a street, so you decide that I'm gonna, close down this road for a week, and I want to see how the traffic will be affected. You can do that on the digital twin, and then come up with specific routes to replace that road that you just blocked. And that experimentation does not need to take place in reality. It will take place on the digital twin, and then you come up with a decision of what to do there. So like you mentioned, in order for me to do that, I need to measure traffic in every single street in Riyadh in order for me to be able to simulate that on a digital twin. And I need to have data over a period of time that would accommodate for, let's say, seasonality. So if the time that I close the street in is in Ramadan, I don't want to compare with the same time last year. I want to compare with the same time of Ramadan last year. So there's lots of layers of complexities there, and I need to take that into account, obviously.
Yeah, I remember also seeing that Naver were talking to NEOM, I think last year or the year before, about digital twins. And yes, you can understand, and NEOM have already talked about this at length, that they are creating a digital twin for the NEOM developments. But you can see,
say that would be easier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. For that, I can see that happening in a sort of very systematic way, because you have so many consultants and companies working on plans for the infrastructure and the development.
And it's built from the ground up, so it's taken it into consideration as you are, heading down the street. You've taken into consideration what IoT technology needs to be there to control the, traffic lights, in order for me to, later on hook it to a digital twin.
Absolutely. So the prospect of doing that for an existing city, that's a big undertaking. But as I understand it, Naver have already developed digital twins at a city scale in South Korea. And presumably some of those are not greenfield sites. They're existing cities with a lot of complexity and history. So they probably are the right partner for Saudi Arabia to do this.
Indeed.
So that's the news of South Korean digital giant Naver signing an agreement, I think on December 3rd, with IoT², the STC-PIF joint venture that obviously focus on IoT solutions and infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. And they signed an agreement to jointly develop cloud-based digital twin platforms for 5 Saudi cities over the next 5 years, including Riyadh, Medina, and Mecca. So interesting stuff. And perhaps we should now move on to the next topic, which is a survey. And I'm quite amused by surveys, because it seems that sometimes we get a survey every month, and sometimes it's half a dozen a month, and they're all polling public opinion on AI and use of data, obviously mostly by vendors that are selling tools and solutions and systems for data management and analytics and AI. But we get a hint of the aspirations of our business and government leaders, and sometimes that maps to the reality of what's going on. Sometimes it doesn't. And I know that in the UAE, for example, that I've seen several surveys that quote 85%, 90% of companies are definitely going to go ahead and embrace generative AI. and they see this as crucial to their business in the coming years. But I don't see evidence of that many companies implementing generative AI on a company scale day to day, or talking to vendors or talking to consultants like yourself. What do you think, Asem?
Well, it reminds me of the good old 80s and 90s when people were thinking, I want to have, a digital transformation. And what they meant by that, I want to replace the typewriter with a word processor. And that is not a digital transformation. It is just having a computer in place. And, having ChatGPT and occasionally chatting with it is not, transforming your business with AI. It's just replacing the Google search with, a different type of information, acquisition. So again, what people aspire to do and what they actually do has not necessarily matched each other, specifically in the technology field, for a long time now.
Yeah, you're right. But this survey, the interesting thing about this survey was it zoomed in on AI regulation, didn't it?
Absolutely. So 87% of those who were surveyed believe that regulation and standards should be, in place for AI. 93% believe that policies would help businesses implement AI responsible. 50% worry about the possibility of legal or ethical consequences of using AI. 47% are concerned about privacy, 40% about transparency, 36% about data governance. Also, 49% of the respondents expect that the use of AI will be pervasive across all sectors and business function. And the interesting one is that 73% of UAE business leaders stated more important for their employees to be multi-skilled than specialized in one area. And they think AI can help with that. And, those are very interesting numbers, and they lead you to... Go ahead.
And this, by the way, is from a new survey from analytics company Alteryx.
Alteryx, yes, indeed.
That announced this week. I think it's interesting that, and obviously this survey was designed partly to highlight concerns of business, but nevertheless, quite a lot of them are concerned about the regulatory environment and about the impact of AI on business issues and legal issues. Do you think that's partly as a result of this scrutiny that AI has come under over the past year, and the news that it's been in Congress and different parliaments, and some of the scaremongering that's gone on about AI taking over? Do you think that's played a role in raising awareness and concerns here?
Well, I think that all what you've mentioned is the effect. The true cause is that we are terrified of AI. And the reason that we're terrified of AI, and I mean, I'm speaking honestly here, and this is actually a very interesting subject to me. It's very interesting subject to... Let me layer the different dimensions. So number one, the rate of change. If we look at the fiasco that happened in OpenAI with Sam Altman, not a month ago, a few weeks ago, correct? And the issue there was that the board was, discovered that, or uncomfortable or whatever, was a certain rate of change. Now, there've been zillions of rumors. We don't want to go there. But the thing is that those who are building AI are being surprised by the rate of change that AI is bringing. Now, this is amazing, because when I studied engineering, there was a law called Moore's Law that would tell you in 18 months, we'll have, a chip that has double the size of transistor and double the amount of transistors, and, half the size that it occupies now. At least this was a way of a rhythm for growth that was, predictive, what's coming next. So now with AI, that is not the case. I read a paper 6 months ago that if you are chatting with GPT, this is an actual research, and you tell ChatGPT, take a deep breath and let's work on this step by step. Just this expression, you have, if my memory serves me right, an 8% increase in the accuracy of the output. Now, this is something that they discovered, researchers, not ChatGPT, not OpenAI. Some researchers discovered and demonstrated this effect after it was built. Now, that's another reason that you should be afraid, because as a software programmer, I started as a software programmer some time ago. A software program is deterministic. As you write it, you can determine what kind of results will come out of it. Obviously, it may have bugs. You can, use wrong instructions. But the concept is, if I say print 5 on the screen, it will print 5 on the screen. That's it. Now, AI in general is not like that. AI, you don't write a program. You may write a program for a neural network or something like that, but then the machine on its own start looking at data and learning from data and coming up with its own conclusions from the data. And as you prompt it, you use awareness to direct the AI to come up with an answer from the data that it learned. Now, some of the behaviors, some of the languages, and so on will depend on the data that it digested. And with huge amount of data, there's very little that you can do to, take out biases, take out this and that. So the undeterministic, the expected part of the whole thing. Then the question of intelligence, conscience, will it ever come to intelligence? Will it be conscious as a human being? We don't have an answer for that. And the reason we don't have an answer for that is we don't have a definition of intelligence in human beings. And philosophers and biologists are still fighting on what it means that we as human beings are conscious. What does it mean? We don't know. So
very true.
All these issues makes us terrified from AI, because one day, and if it becomes smarter than us, who would stop it? Will we be able to stop it? So I'm not advocating, any specific direction. I'm just saying that the number of questions outweigh any type of answers at the moment. And, when people asked to slow down AI, they were not tree huggers or anything. They were the people who came up with AI in the first place. So, those aspects are the real cause for the Congress hearing, are the real cause for the UK government stepping up, for the UN stepping up, and so on. And the only thing that I'm worried about is the mentality of the post-Second World War mentality of, this is the NATO and this is the Warsaw and this is not how we're going to solve it. It does not need a regulation in the US or regulation in the UAE or whatever. It needs a global effort of collaboration, because one country, let's say Botswana, comes up with this AI model. It's over the cloud. Anybody can use it. So it doesn't matter what you have regulated in your own country. So this is an effort that needs to be worked on globally. It doesn't mean that locally, we don't need to address it. Obviously, we need to address it locally as well. But the guarantee is the global. One last thing. Over the last week, some of you may have seen videos of how users started hacking ChatGPT. And as they started hacking ChatGPT, they were able to retrieve some of the original data it was trained on. And some of that apparently, allegedly, is being proved to be privately owned data. So that is another question that businesses are concerned about. If I use a platform, AI platform, and I generate, content, and that content later on makes me a subject to a intellectual property law case or whatever, that I'm violating somebody else's, private data. And if that's the case, and then I want my AI to be regulated. I want to be protected. And this is why we're seeing today many of the AI companies extending, indemnification to their users, saying, if you go to a court case or whatever, we'll take care of the cost. So all these considerations are obviously making people worry to some extent on is AI regulated or not.
Yeah, it's understandable, really, because it's such a broad swathe of different issues that require quite a lot of knowledge to understand at all. And so it's not surprising that business is a little bit wary. We're talking about research came out this week related to a survey from analytics company Alteryx, where 87% of those surveyed believed that regulations and standards around AI usage, including generative AI, should be developed, and that 93% believe that regulation and policies like that would help businesses implement AI responsibly. And another thing that says to me is that I think there's a lot of businesses that want to see leadership in this area so that they have an example to follow. Because when you have this many issues in the public domain and you have these aggressive debates at government level and at scientific level, as a single business, you can't really be expected to figure it all out. You do need some direction.
Absolutely. If you look at OpenAI and you see that the board has disagreed with the CEO on how to govern, their own company, then you'd be worried that somebody would be taking care of that other than the software developing company that comes up with a solution, because they on their own are not able to manage their own governance.
Absolutely. I've got a question from 𝗟𝗓𝗓, so I'm going to just bring him on for a moment.
Yeah,
Hi,
thanks.
𝗟𝗓𝗓. Thanks for joining.
Thank you as well. This is the first time I'm joining. My name is 𝗟𝗓𝗓. I'm based in Silicon Valley. This is a hot topic here, as you can imagine, in terms of AI and regulatory aspects of it. Asem, I like your thoughts around the need for regulation, and I've seen the Alteryx survey as well, and comparatively, there are several other surveys of similar fashion out there. But help me understand from your perspective, how does this get solved on a global level? I think their aspiration is there, but when we have situations like a clear and present danger to fossil fuel activity, an event that is going on in your region as we speak at the moment, and there are incredible amount of politics surrounding that, which itself is a clear and present danger. We know that, and there's speculation on whether there's science around it or not. I think there is. And we can't come to a global consensus on that. And that matter has been ongoing for years. I'll give you another example. Social media. We were all aware, at least when, Facebook came out, Google came out, of the repercussions of social media. It's only 20 years later. Let me repeat, 20 years later, that we have regulation in the US, at least, that says that under 13 cannot access certain social media sites. It's only now, 20 years later, that we've seen the impact and we have regulated it. AI has incredible promise. It's moving at a much faster rate. But we have damage done with fossil fuels. We have damage done with social media. We probably have damage done in other areas as well, because we're not great, I would say, custodians of what is good for society. We are great innovators and we're pioneers as humans. So my question is, given these examples, how do you think this is going to get solved at a global level?
Thank you very much for the question. I love the question. Well, it depends on your confidence in the human race to start with. So if we talk about wars have been there ever since the ancient Egyptians, and they're still there today. So is there a progress possible at all? Good question. But I just want to remind you, I never said to solve those issues. I said to address those issues. And sometimes it's not about coming up with answers. It's more important coming up with questions. And having, a global kind of involvement will raise different sorts of questions depending on where you're coming from. So sometimes the underdeveloped world, the Africas and the Asias, and sometimes have totally different perspective on things than, the Western world. So the Western world has been consuming fossil fuel for, I don't know, centuries. And now they would say, let's stop it. Well, in Africa, maybe they don't have access to nuclear power. Maybe they cannot afford the solar power. So they raise the questions, how can we do that? And again, by raising that question, then we come up with a solution that would include them as well. So it is nearly impossible to come up with definitive answers for anything. But by asking more questions and by including more stakeholders, you would be able to make a solution that would have a better chance of succeeding. I don't know if I answered your question, 𝗟𝗓𝗓, or not.
No, I appreciate your response. And I think, yes, you're absolutely right. It starts with dialogue and conversation and asking the right questions. At the same time, I also believe that it starts with the underlying economics around AI, right? Who is making the decisions on AI? Who are the companies that are pulling the strings on that front. I think there are a lot of unanswered questions around this. It's a complex matter. Conversation and dialogue certainly helps, but I'm not so sure if we can get to a global resolution on that. Even though we have examples of that, we have come together on data privacy in some ways, right? In what's happened in Europe, it's what's happened in the US, it's what's happened in the UK and several other parts of the world. So I see it from the perspective of needing a global dialogue around it, but some of the examples and the
Chael,
tools to solve it
let me
do
interrupt you
exist.
for a second. When you say we come to an agreement on data privacy, when WhatsApp rolled out their change of data privacy terms and conditions, moving your data from WhatsApp to Meta, the Facebook and so on. If you read the terms and conditions, if you live in the European Union, then that does not concern you. If you live outside the European Union, then take it or leave it. So no, we did not come to a consensus. Absolutely not. And the way that companies are treating the individuals is not based on their rights. It's not based on they would deserve. It's based on the economic consequences of not following the law in the region. And if that region is of a specific economic size, let me give you another example. When Facebook decided not to pay, the sources of the news in Australia, they said, you know what? We're not publishing any news on Australia. Now, mind you, if this happened in Europe, could they said the same? And I'm not talking here about, an underdeveloped country or anything. I'm just saying that this economic cost of blocking it in Europe and Australia was not high for Facebook, and they can afford to, punish Australia for whatever they want to do. So I disagree that we have, managed to descend the economic model to a more human model. And I'm not naive. I'm not saying that we will get there. I'm just saying that a multi-party model where you take into consideration everyone and where you take into consideration the problems, different effects on different stakeholders is definitely much better suited of those sort of problems.
So we're going to have to round up in a minute. So I could just add in a few seconds on this. I think that the way that our world is built sort of requires that we address these issues at all levels. So we don't have the luxury of waiting for a global consensus, in some cases even a national consensus, and this needs to be looked at many different levels. And I think the UAE is one of those countries that deserves credit in raising these issues sooner rather than later and trying to develop frameworks that can help policy move forward to regulate AI and the impact of that. Final thoughts, 𝗟𝗓?
Yeah, look, I agree with what you just said. I was at GTEx 2 months ago, and I was speaking about AI at GTEx and exactly these topics. I do agree that, we don't have synergies around data and data privacy, as you mentioned, Asem. And I think that just reinforces the point that I'm making, which is that I think for AI, we can't wait for, Carrington, you put it well, we can't wait for a global consensus around that. But at the moment, I have to say, from my perspective, and I'm actually writing a book on this, is that I think AI is more divisive than uniting at the moment. And I will leave it at that.
Asem?
I think that we have lots of good opportunities because this is a new start again for humanity with a new challenge. And the way we address this challenge, I mean, the thought process behind it is really deterministic of the outcome. So I would love to see a more modern approach of looking at this problem than, the previous way we've looked at other problems, and not just use it as a competitive advantage between one company over the other or one nation over the other.
Sounds sense. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. So thanks very much, 𝗟𝗓, for posing the question and making those comments. Interesting discussion. From Asem and I, thanks so much for joining us on Middle East AI News Live, The Wrap. Thanks to Asem for being such a great co-host this morning.
My pleasure, sir.
Look forward to doing this again sometime. I'll be back at the same time next week, 7 a.m. UAE time, 6 a.m. Saudi Arabia, or 7 p.m. PST, with another Middle East AI News weekly roundup. Thank you so much for listening, and hope to see you again next week. Have a great day.